with the meditation. So again, beginning by preparing the body. Keeping the back nice and straight. And allowing the entire body to become completely relaxed, completely at ease. Using the out-breath to relax and release any tightness or tension in any part of the body. And allowing the breathing to settle into its natural rhythm. And with each out breath, letting go of any thoughts that may have arisen, happily releasing them. And setting the mind in a state of ease and relaxation. Bringing the mind into the present moment through focusing on the sensations of the breath throughout the body. We all want to be happy, and we all want to be free of suffering. often seems to us as if the source of our happiness and the source of our suffering is out there in the world. And as a result, one of the main methods we use to try to find happiness and overcome suffering is that we try to manipulate the things around us. We try to attract people, places and things that seem to be the source of our happiness. And we try to push away or avoid people, places and things that seem to be the source of our suffering. But is this strategy effective? Are we getting any closer to finding genuine happiness and overcoming our suffering? No matter how hard we try to control and manipulate the things around us, we still seem to encounter suffering. And we're still chasing after that elusive happiness. And if we don't get the things we want, we often become very frustrated. And even if we do get the things we want, they never seem to completely satisfy us, and we simply end up craving for more. And we often end up with a lot of disappointment and dissatisfaction when things don't live up to our expectations. So what's the solution? According to Buddhism, we're simply looking in the wrong place. What would happen if we turned our attention to our own mind? What would happen if we began to cultivate more mindfulness? If we cultivated a more calm, clear, and focused mind? And what would happen if we reduced our mental afflictions, such as anger, hatred, craving and jealousy? And what would happen if we could begin to see things more clearly and accurately without projecting or distorting what we apprehend? And we began to cultivate loving kindness and compassion for ourselves and others. And instead of reacting to situations out of old habits, we began to respond in ways more conducive to our own and others' happiness. And what would happen if we could begin to see difficult situations in our life as opportunities for growth, instead of seeing them as problems or obstacles? So let's set a positive motivation. A motivation wishing to discover practical methods to overcome our suffering and to find genuine happiness. And we can dedicate all of our efforts for the past 2 days towards that goal. And we can expand our motivation and dedication out to include others. Wishing to help those around us also to overcome their suffering and find genuine happiness. And also dedicating our efforts towards that goal. And again, as part of the dedication, I'll recite the dedication prayer from great Indian Master Shantideva. And as I do so, you might like to think about the words. May all beings everywhere, plagued by sufferings of body and mind, obtain an ocean of happiness and joy by virtue of my merits. May no living creature suffer, commit evil, or ever fall ill. May no one be afraid or belittled with a mind weighed down by depression. May the blind see forms and the deaf hear sounds. May those whose bodies are worn with toil be restored on finding repose. May the naked find clothing, the hungry find food. May the thirsty find water and delicious drinks. May the poor find wealth, those weak with sorrow find joy. May the forlorn find hope, constant happiness and prosperity. May there be timely rains and bountiful harvests. May all medicines be effective and wholesome prayers bear fruit. May all who are sick and ill quickly be freed from their ailments. Whatever diseases there are in the world, may they never occur again. May the frightened cease to be afraid, and those bound be freed. May the powerless find power, and may people think of benefiting each other. For as long as space remains, for as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. What I'd like to do for the rest of this session is to look at integration. How we can integrate particularly this Shamatha practice into a daily life. So first I'd like to look at how to integrate Shamatha in the bigger picture. And here we can talk about integrating in three things together. That we want to integrate view, and here I mean philosophical view, our world view, meditation, and conduct. Because we need an integrated approach if we really want to take benefit from this Shamatha practice and actually to transform our life. Now, mindfulness, which of course is the main tool in the Shamatha practice, is now becoming very popular in the modern world. It's a good thing. But unfortunately, what is happening a lot is this integration is left out. Particularly because somehow it's often felt that all these other elements are religious. So we don't want that stuff, well, that's that religious stuff. Compassion, well, that's religious. All of that religious stuff. Ethics, no, get that out of there. And so what happens is mindfulness is stripped out of the framework, and then it becomes, as a person recently, I think some years ago, coined the term, McMindfulness. As in McDonald's, McMindfulness. It really becomes fast food mindfulness. Not very healthy for us. In fact, often bad for our health. Because without the framework, we could use mindfulness to be more focused on how to cheat people, to be more greedy in business and in our life. So actually we could use that tool, like fast food, to damage our health. So it's important. And then, of course, even if we're not using it for that very unethical reason, if we don't have a framework, then what often happens is, of course, people have a lot of problems in their life, a lot of difficulties, a lot of stress, a lot of agitation and so forth, and then they go to a little mindfulness session and they're focusing on the breath or something, and of course then temporarily they can let go of all of that neurotic things and stress, and for a little short time they feel, oh, now I feel relaxed. And then of course they come out of that session and they go back to their dysfunctional lifestyle and back to the stress, back to everything else. So basically the mindfulness is like a little band-aid we're putting on things. We're not really going to get any effective change in our life because these other areas here are not being addressed. So if we really want to get the most out of the Shamatha practice and really benefit us in our life, we need to integrate these three things. And here, the first thing I want to look at is view, philosophical view, or you could also call world view. And of course, everyone has one of these, whether it's really very well thought out or not. And generally in our world view is the idea of happiness, you know. My worldview, I want to be happy, I want to be free of suffering. That's often within anyone's worldview. But often within that worldview or philosophical view of happiness, we tend to equate pleasure with happiness. I want to be more happy, therefore all I need is more pleasure. Give me more pleasure and I'll be more happy. So then of course we do, as we did in that meditation, we saw in the meditation, we end up in this manipulation game that, okay, to be more happy and have less suffering, I have to manipulate things. You know, I have to attract things that seem to make me happy. I have to push away things that seem to give me suffering. And of course, we know from our own experience that's not very effective. And often it induces a lot of extra suffering because by doing this, we're really just trapping ourselves in the hope-fear cycle. Hoping for pleasant things, fearing and worrying about unpleasant things. And what you'll find, and you probably have experienced this, is that this craving for pleasure actually destroys our enjoyment of pleasure. For example, if we have strong craving for something, maybe chocolate or something, that strong craving very much agitates our mind. And so then we become obsessed about, I have to have chocolate or I have to have this or that. And that really agitates our mind. So already we're suffering. And then, of course, if we don't get that thing we're craving, even more suffering, frustration. And even if we get it, then often we're worried about, have I got enough of it? Is it going to last? And then, of course, if it's food, we're gulping it down, so we're not even really enjoying it. And often we eat too much and get sick. So these are the... And then, of course, even worse than that, with this strong craving, see, craving and attachment is never satisfied. And craving and attachment has this idea of, I want something bigger, better, and different. So if there's something that we enjoy now, and we know this from our own experience, if we enjoy this now, but we get it too often, or too often, then after some time, our craving and attachment goes, that's boring. That's boring now. I don't want that anymore. Give me something different. Something bigger, better, different. So we actually lose out on the things we used to enjoy because attachment and craving is saying that's not satisfying me anymore. Give me something different. And so if this is part of our worldview, then of course meditation, our practice here this is working against meditation practice, particularly the Shamatha practice. So as part of the worldview then, or philosophical view, we really need to come to appreciate that happiness, source of happiness and suffering is not really out there. And this is the very first thing that Buddha taught after he achieved enlightenment. 4 noble truths. The first 2 noble truths is the truth of suffering, cause of suffering. So if we can really reflect on these 2 noble truths, we can come to appreciate actually the source of happiness and suffering is not out there, it's in here. And the real source of our suffering is our mental afflictions. Anger, jealousy, craving, fear, anxiety, depression. these mental afflictions are the real source of our suffering. And they're coming from a mistaken view of reality. They're coming, and this is what we're going to look at in some detail in 2 weeks' time, the Vipassana retreat here, it's coming from this distorted view of reality, a dysfunctional worldview. And as part of the worldview is also that there's a me here and an independent world out there. So here then, if we really want a support for our meditation, our shamatha practice, we need to fix up our worldview, our philosophical view, understanding that the real source of happiness and suffering is coming within, and at a deeper level, understanding there's no independent me here and no independent world there. We live in an interdependent world. And I think that's something that's becoming more and more obvious in our modern society when we look at things like climate change and so forth, this whole idea of interdependency. So if we can really start to fix up our worldview in those ways, then that's going to be very supportive and conducive for meditation practice. And then our meditation practice can also help in terms of furthering that worldview. So again, the whole topic of philosophical view we'll be looking at in quite some detail 2 weeks' time, the Vipassana retreat here. Then, in terms of meditation, of course, this is also important because sometimes people want to figure out things intellectually. I want to work out the answer. What's the answer? And then so people spend a lot of time, and we see this in many philosophers who want to figure out the answer. And often they can come up with very brilliant philosophies, sound very impressive. But unfortunately, often there's no way of testing their philosophy. Either you have to sort of accept it or reject it. There's not often any way of testing. And then, of course, even if we accept someone's brilliant philosophy, is that going to improve our life? No. In fact, sometimes philosophers are very miserable and sometimes it's even worse because they feel like they've got the answer, but somehow their life's not improving. And so then they can get even more frustrated. And the reality is, of course, and this is easy to understand, is our behaviour, our conduct, is not driven by our intellectual understanding. A classic example, impermanence. The fact that things are changing moment by moment. I think we all have that view, don't we? We all believe that things are changing moment by moment. Science has proven it, we learnt it at school. So part of our worldview is, yes, everything's changing moment by moment. Does that intellectual belief of impermanence, is that somehow affecting our behaviour or driving our behaviour? No, of course not. Because our behaviour is not driven by our intellectual understanding. Our behaviour is driven by our instinctive habits. And our instinctive habit is telling us that this laptop is the same laptop that was here yesterday, it'll be the same laptop here tomorrow. Is this laptop the same as the one here that was here yesterday? No. But we interact with things as if it was. We see instinctively things as very stable and unchanging. And that's how we behave, interact with things. So actually in our behaviour, we're completely out of sync with reality. Out of sync. There's no such thing as stability. Everything's changing moment by moment. But we're behaving as if things were stable. And then, of course, when they change or break or something, we get distraught. We get upset because we were expecting it to stay stable when we know that it's nothing stable. So if we could bring this worldview just of impermanence through meditation, if we can come to internalize that intellectual understanding and bring it into experience, if we come to realize impermanence in meditation, then our life would already dramatically improve. Then experientially we would see things as in a flow state and we'd be much more in harmony with reality, much less mental afflictions, much less suffering. So meditation is key It's not enough to be very smart. In fact, being very smart on its own can create more suffering. What we need to do is bring our intellectual understanding into experience through meditation. Then our conduct will start to change. So therefore, meditation is important. We need to meditate. We need to come to internalize these ideas that we're developing here. And of course, a key element here is shamatha. Because if we don't have a stable, clear mind, there is no way we're going to realize impermanence or anything else in our vipassana practice. Because we're going to investigate, and then of course we're going to get distracted, we're going to get spaced out, nothing will penetrate.